Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday, not necessarily at 7 a.m. Eastern Time or 12 p.m. GMT. We are running, I believe, at 8 a.m. Eastern Time today and 12 p.m. GMT in London because of daylight savings time. We don't know what 100% what time we're going to be back tomorrow, but we will decide and let you know so that you know. Thank you so much for joining us. Apologies for a little bit of confusion there. But as always, I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and Sammy. And today we have a very special guest live on X and YouTube at the same time. We have Bread Guy, builder of things, Gigabrain on ETH, great thinker on all things crypto. Gonna hear a lot of his insights on where he sees the market going, how things are playing out in just a little bit. But before we get there, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. We do not know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and please do exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Monday, the 11th of March. How are you and your bags doing today?
And GM, they are the opposite of my polo shirt. They are all green. It's also the first show that we ever hosted with BTC above 70K. That
Ooh.
is quite a sensational feeling. I think Sammy and I are also ready with a shit ton of bread jokes to be made and puns that you, Bread, have to go over the next hour. All in all, super excited for today's Spaces.
Yeah, that's very cool. Why so many bread jokes though? Like we've had other guests before. They all have like fairly interesting names. It just seems like the bread kind of inspired everyone for some reason.
Everyone's making money. Yeah, bread. Everyone wants to make money. Everyone's feeling good.
Yeah, Sammy.
Everyone's cooking. Everyone's toasting.
It's just it's a nice time in the market to have Bread join us. Bread, welcome to the stage. Welcome to YouTube with us. How are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us. How are you feeling as we push past all-time highs on Bitcoin?
Yeah, man. Pleasure's mine, honestly. You guys, got some quality content, so happy to contribute. Yeah, I mean, elated. I get I don't know. The payout's here. It's kind of always been here last few weeks, whatever. It's kept bubbling up, but I don't know. Like it feels real. Feels more real now. And yeah, we got people buying, trying to put hats on entire spheres. We got crazy shit. Professional players reaching out to what's his face, Evan, to try to put their entire money in our salary in Doge.
I saw
Things
that.
are starting to get frothy, but we have so much more to go. So yeah, feel good.
Very interesting stuff. Yeah, we definitely want to try to place where we are in the cycle and get some thoughts and opinions on that in a moment. Legendary, you just mentioned like it's our first show post 70K Bitcoin. Did you see the tweet I put out earlier where I said people might not have seen, or people might know about the modern market now, but did you know we were producing podcasts on Spotify and YouTube back in August 2022? Did you see that tweet earlier?
I did. That
What was the price of Bitcoin back then?
That was exactly what I was thinking. I was looking at ETH though. August 2022. Where was that? Let me see. We've been.
That was bear market.
Where's August? Fucking hell. 1.6K. Ugh.
It was funny. I think people were feeling sorry for us in the comments. So just, well, there was like an amount of respect in the comments, just like, oh wow, like it's cool that you've managed to keep going and whatever. But on top of that, I think it was a little bit like, damn, you guys were scraping the barrel back then for news, like trying to produce content in the bear market, which on reflection, I think is completely true. But it's funny because when we started in the bear market, we didn't know that we were scraping the barrel. We were just reporting on whatever was there. And now we just know that we were scraping the barrel in hindsight because there's so much more to report on. Any reflection?
But you also mentioned that it's tougher to find news like in the bull market when everyone is like bull posting, sharing charts, posting Nick memes, or farming the block airdrop. Then it's actually hard to cut through the noise and find the real news.
Exactly. Like the other day, I actually thought, I mean, I'm not being serious here, but like there was a point over a weekend, maybe I was just like, is there any need for the snapshot? Like, it's just, everything's a mess. Everything is everywhere. Everything's happening. Basically, the news is that we're up. That's basically the news. Like, do I need to write this piece of news, this newsletter every day?
Check price, good price.
Yeah, exactly. Like that should have been the headline, and that was it. And we'd probably be able to talk about that for the whole hour. That was one of my reflections. But look, we're going to get into all kinds of things. We're going to get into all the headlines. Also want to have a chat with Brad about just how he's seeing things, what he's up to, because I know he's been expressing some interesting opinions on the market, and also like the relative strengths of Bitcoin versus ETH versus Solana, which I think is on a lot of people's minds too. So we'll do that before the headlines, as in before the discussion of the headlines, but let's hit the headlines first to get you up to speed with everything that's been happening in the last 24 hours. As always, this is coming from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's get into it, starting with some price action. We've got Bitcoin up a couple of percent, passing all-time highs at 71.5K, I believe now. It's about 71.8, almost hitting 72. Very excited about that. Number 2, ETH is also past 4K, which people are quite excited about from what I can tell. Solana is just a touch under $150, and that is the first headline. Number 2, Map Fury's Peplicators sell out 22,000 editions at 0.05 ETH, raising $4.3 million and now trading 4x up to 0.23 ETH. I think they traded as high as 0.35 at one point in time. A real cook over the weekend for any of those minters. I want to touch on that a little bit. And finally, meme coin season continues as Ansem seeks to raise $650,000 to put the dog with hat meme on the Las Vegas sphere. I believe half of that has been raised so far at 300K. We'd like to talk about that a little bit, and maybe the assertion that we cannot be in a bull market because that has not sold out, has not been fully raised. If we were, maybe we would be in a bull market. In terms of some notable sales and the floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks sliding down actually towards 50 ETH, down a few percent. I saw some sales at around 50 ETH. So obviously struggling against this rising ETH price. Bored Apes at 16.6 ETH, down 4%. Mutants at 2.6. DGods down 6% at 1.6. Captains holding the 5 ETH floor. Azuki's down a few percent, down 5% at 4.1. Penguins trying to stay firm at 13.8. Mad Lads is the steadiest of all. We report on this every single day. Mad Lads will not move from around 190 Solana. And the announced winning bid was at 6 ETH. Few notable sales. Xcopy when airdrop sold by Kevin Rose, exiting a number of his NFT positions for 151 ETH, sold to Cosimo de Medici for $600,000. Tyler Hobbs, this black dark Fidenza, also sold by Kevin Rose for 142 ETH, $554,000. And a Map Fury, a red hoodie Peplicator selling for 11.1 ETH, that is $44,000. Pretty nice flip for someone who minted that for 0.05 ETH. You know, just 24 hours before. Very casual, huge W there. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Before we get into it, anything catching your attention?
Definitely like the Peplicator, the red hoodie, especially if you think about the mint mechanics. Like during the phase where the mint was open, you could basically re-roll the trades. So if you took the time and re-rolled, you had a pretty good chance to pull something epic and flip it for even more. And that's, I think, what happened with this hoodie. I think it was someone from Cyrus's group from Wumbo who was re-rolling until he hit that.
I think so.
Is there a price associated to that? A re-roll?
I don't think so. I think it was gas fees though. It wasn't signature. I think you had gas fees to do it. I was out of house, like I just minted essentially, but it didn't re-roll. But I think it was gas fees. But yeah, Swizzy is saying, is agreeing with emojis.
Interesting. Yeah, if it was free, I suspect everyone would have just kept re-rolling, right? Or at least that would have made most sense. Oh, Duck in the comments, Moritz said it was free. And Duck knows because I think I read his tweet. This is public. He bought, I think it was 30, potentially
60. He went
Shout
in
out
with
to
size,
Duck.
yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Duck with the common W for him. Outstanding trader, collector. Wow. Okay. So that was free. So that's a big fumble for anyone who didn't bother to participate. I want to get into that in a little bit later, Legendary, because it's one of the headlines. I want to maybe start off by thinking about a couple of things I've pulled up here. One to do with just kind of where we are in the market. This was some interesting commentary by Kobe, who wrote the following when my browser loads. Oh, it's all been deleted. Oh, I know why it's deleted, because I'm not on the right account. Why don't we start with this? Brad, so in general, you've been speaking quite a lot about, I think you're quite bullish ETH. That's like one of the starting points. You're very bullish ETH. We've spoken about how ETH is like the most built up, right? Because it has all these man hours that has like been developing it. And yet every, we were just talking off air, every single new coin that's going crazy in terms of volume is on Solana. And yet there's this really cool new ordinal system on Bitcoin. Like, what's your headline thoughts about how these three ecosystems will kind of play out in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that I believe all of it will go up and to the right. Like this is such a small ecosystem that money's going to flow in. It's going to splash around everywhere. Like it's going to get weird everywhere. So, because I think a lot of people, whenever I talk about which one will progress faster, better, like they always take it like they're just going to go to zero. That's not going to be the case, especially for base protocols like Solana, Ethereum, Bitcoin. I think those are the three that have the mind share, obviously. And yeah, I was talking to you guys at like updating my thesis a little bit on, and this is mostly like a ETH thing where, yeah, like I think ETH ultimately, because of the man hours, everything that they have developed, like that's not something you can speed run, and it's a lot of stuff that now Bitcoin is going to have to be faced with, right? MEV is like a very simple concept, right? Just the idea that there's people that are in the background, like taking advantage of front end users because of immaturity of the protocol, immaturity of like the ecosystem, all that stuff. That's been going on for years on Ethereum, right? And people have been getting destroyed by people. And Ethereum has made updates to kind of circumvent some of that stuff, protect people, whatever. That kind of stuff is all going to be coming to Bitcoin, and it's going to like degrade the user experience over there. And it's just it takes time. So like they may eventually get to an equal point, but that just takes time. So my bet is that I think Ethereum, with all of the mind share, all of the network effects in both people and like development teams, other ecosystems tied to it, that's like betting on its success, all of that stuff eventually just going to continue to bubble up. Like, yeah, like Ordinals has a lot of the enthusiasm right now. There's a lot of quick energy, a lot of money splashing around. It's very rich, the ETF, a lot of great things, but I just think that stuff shifts back to where the time has been spent doing stuff on a medium or short to medium time horizon, 1 to 3 years. And then now talking to you guys just before this is just, you see where everyone is going to do the degenerate stuff. It's very freeing to be able to be in an ecosystem that is really composable on a single blockchain and has a decent, great user experience for stuff like shitcoining, right? Like I think everyone's kind of caught the fever the last few days, week, whatever. And it's very easy to do that. And I think we're going to see, a lot of retail gravitate towards that experience because it is a lot less friction filled, even if you don't like believe and or understand and or agree with like the token economics underneath it all. End users don't care about that stuff, right? Retail doesn't care about that. We're debating consensus mechanisms. They're just going to go to whatever's simplest and where they can make the most money, right? Whatever makes the most sense. And I feel like, yeah, those integrated blockchains like that they have a real advantage there.
Yeah, it's a really strong point. And I think how you kind of prefaced all of that was like, ultimately the value accrues to all of these things. I guess what people struggle with the most is trying to figure out the allocations, because they want to try to make the most on in all moments. And so I think they find it difficult there. Interesting thoughts. Legendary, what are your reflections on Bread's contribution there? And are you persuaded, and I know maybe what your answer is here, I'm just wanting you to maybe re-articulate it. Are you persuaded by the idea that, like, look, Bitcoin is past the all-time high, ETH is not quite past the all-time high, but Solana is the one which is furthest away? Does that persuade you in any way that that's got the biggest room to grow?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think you know my answer. It's all narrative driven, right? If the narrative sustains and people like to think that, and this is where the attention is, then this is what's going to happen. Again, my opinion, I think relative lows as a concept doesn't make sense in this case. Just to say coin has been that high and other coins are higher, so my coin will go even higher is a very simple logic. But if enough people talk about that and put their money where the mouth is, that's exactly what's going to happen. I think you can't ignore narratives in a market like that. You look at something like Nick with I choose rich, and with the I got to a point where it's actually annoying me on my timeline because it's so much. But I'm not ignoring the narrative. I'm buying the meme coin. If everyone talks about it, who the fuck am I to fade that coin and not buy it? So your personal opinion doesn't matter. It matters what gets the most attention and what basically the consensus opinion is, with some of those things, not with everything, but in that case, it's very narrative driven.
Okay. Very fair enough. Like I definitely take your point that that the narrative will always win out. I guess the question for people that they're trying to decide, especially in this kind of season of meme coin mania, maybe Sammy can take this. I'm going to present what Kobe shared, what I was trying to share earlier. I've just found it on a different account. Kind of reflecting on allocation to meme coins and like how he might be thinking about it. And I think it might be interesting for people knowing how much people kind of eulogize this person as a trader and investor, his reflection. So I'm just going to read it out and then we'll hear from you. So someone just tagged him and asked, like, where do meme coins fit into your allocation triangle? And he said 0 for me. And I guess this is an interesting reflection. This is what he said. He said, and I'm showing this for people who are watching in. If you're just listening, I'll read it out. No, I just don't care. Not in my lane. And so I don't touch. I've only really succeeded in a large way when I've been buying stuff that I truly believe will be around in 5 years. Even if I thought the timeline was much shorter, mostly because I don't love the necessity to snipe exits like I did in 2013, 16. I'm sure it's very lucrative for people willing to grind and play games of chicken, but it's just very uninteresting personally. If I'd ever made money on Doge in earlier years, I may have a different opinion. People should do whatever they want though, and whatever works for them though. No judging for me. And I'll just continue reading because I thought it was all quite interesting. Said one must also recognize that I'm kind of old now. I'm not in my teens or my 20s anymore. I have been doing this for over a decade by multiple years and don't have some insatiable hunger for money anymore. So it's not intellectually interesting to me. I'm probably not that bothered about it. And truly, I cannot think of something less intellectually engaging for me at this point in my life than a token with a funny name. And he continues and says, one thing I will add is that meme coins do seem to be one of the last remaining opportunities in crypto for a normal person to go from 0 to respectable in a short period of time. And this is the sole reason I don't feel very ivory tower or judgy about. I'm going to stop there, Sammy. I think it's a pretty interesting reflection from someone who's been in the space a lot longer than us. How do you respond to that?
I think, what he's getting at, he's obviously concentrated wealth to get wealth. And I think diversifying later on when you've got money, it kind of makes more sense. Like, why would you risk it all on high bet rolls when you can kind of sustain it and keep it and just invest it and earn? And I think we've previously talked about this. If you've got the wealth, you're earning those 40% gains on lending or like doing these things that you can just stake and earn 20% yields or 10% yields, kind of makes more sense when you've got millions. But if you do have small amounts of funds and you know you're coming into a bull cycle on a risk on environment and you know some of these plays are going to work out, and you don't have a lot of money, then it kind of makes sense to concentrate that capital to try and achieve those gains. And I think anyone new coming into the market would see these like mimetic sort of things on coins and find it amusing. I don't think he would, as he says, just because he's been around the block a few times. I think just going back to your point as well on the Bitcoin cycle, I think the biggest concern the biggest thing that concerns me is that we do see Bitcoin rip and liquidity just gets pulled from all the alts. And I think, like, for me, holding all these other assets, if you have that suddenly suck out, it can be pretty gut wrenching to see your bags absolutely tank. but then holding it with that conviction to then see it come through when that alt cycle does hit. So I think that is probably my only concern if we see Bitcoin absolutely tear, and then everything else left behind. And we saw that in the last cycle early on, but then it does kind of rotate through those cycles to then come back. So it's just trying to work out when that happens, how long it's going to take, and then positioning yourself.
Yeah. Interesting thoughts there. I think that's a pretty fair kind of position. I guess in a way, Kobe's kind of hedged the take there. It's like, look, it's not for me. I don't do it for these reasons. And yet I appreciate that for many people, this might be a useful thing to allocate some time and attention to. Brad, what's your reflection on that kind of position, which is, meme coins might not be for certain people. Maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's an experience thing, maybe it's a wealth thing. You just don't need to take that risk. How do you kind of think about meme coins as part of the portfolio, part of this attention game we're playing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a pretty respectable position because it's just the traditional one, right? Just don't overextend yourself, stay in your lane, be conservative, make money. It's kind of like the Warren Buffett of crypto, which is still incredibly risky relative to traditional finance. But like I participate very, very little, but I do. And I kind of reflect on why I do that. And I don't know if it is because I think I can make a lot of money, or if I legitimately think it's a emerging sector and that it will have outsized gains. Like, so like, am I gambling or am I investing whenever I'm doing this stuff? And I don't know that I've fully come around to what I think I'm doing. So I do think some of these things will be very sticky, and for the same reasons that Legendary talked about earlier, it's just network effects broadly, right? You see SHIB has its own L2, you see Doge like has an entire community. Like if enough people give a shit about something, that gives it value. And who am I to say that this thing is not an investable thing, right? If enough people in the future are going to continue to do this shit, then it will be something that is investable. Whether or not it's for me is kind of irrelevant. If I think other people will do it, then it's a thing. So I think I'm skewing more towards, I think this is kind of a new age where these things are able to be proliferated and created so easily that it's almost, I was on a space the other day, and it's almost like South Park, right? Like every week South Park would come out with an episode that's really topical, right? It's relevant for the time, and it hits for a lot of people. And now you can basically take some of these things, and it's like almost like also like a prediction market where you see these things pop up, and you're like, the markets with money is deciding what is the thing that they care about, like what is funny, what is not funny, whatever. And I don't know, like I'm coming around to the fact that it's not just like gambling, straight up gambling, that it actually is something that is an emerging class.
Interesting. It sounds like maybe we are a few steps ahead of where the majority of people are receiving the message about Bitcoin, where they're kind of being told or starting to think about allocating a certain proportion to the asset class. And when they mean the asset class, what they mean is Bitcoin. Whereas what we're saying, or I guess what you're thinking about, and maybe this is an interesting way to think about it, is that, right, we're already allocated to Bitcoin, we're already allocated to ETH, we're already allocated to Solana, but there's a certain proportion that we need to allocate to the other investable class of assets. If meme coins is a bucket, or whether maybe specifically dog coins or specifically cat coins. I was literally, there was that trader, I think in the last cycle, who created like a dog index. It wasn't literally an index that you could buy into, but it was just a whole list of all the dog coins, and just aggressively bought all of those coins. And so there must have been a thought at one point in time for that person, like, I want to have X amount of exposure to not just meme coins, but dog specific meme coins. Brad, you came off mute. Do you want to come in on that and then go to Legendary?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And it's honestly what I was thinking of. I think you addressed, so I went back off mute, but it's, you have it right. I just think that it is something that needs exposure. And like what I was thinking of, reflecting of kind of what the bear market was, because you see all of these upstart communities spawn, die, like all these meme coins that try to do their thing, right? There's the Scrotos that kind of did their stuff, and a few of them went out. And I just had this like kind of thought that, over that 2 years, year and a half of the bear market, we had all of these communities spawn, die, and then consolidate, spawn, die, consolidate, spawn, die, consolidate, and they've all kind of got behind the ones that have been the winners of that fight, right? The Doges, the Lifts, the whatever. Doge is older, but Mog, Pepe's, whatever of this season, and those now for me, because I'm not the person that's going to be up at 3 a.m. like shitcoining every single night because I want sleep and I want balance. Now I'm paying the premium to find the ones that the market and the communities have decided these are the things that are the funny, the relatable, the mimetic asset classes within this asset class. So now I buy a premium and I take that higher and we all go for it because that is the thing that's probably going to be funny or useful or interesting, proliferated to everyone who comes after this point, right? Because now it's a hardened community. So I got, a lot of deep philosophical thought on dog pictures. This.
Love it. Legendary, before we move on from this, any final reflections from you?
Very much agree with those takes. I think it is important to know your investment horizon, know where you're at with your portfolio building, and also realistically, I think Seneca also had that post on BTC essentially doing a 3x from its lows. Can you outperform that? But do you even need to outperform that? Are you in a point where your portfolio is fine with just quote unquote casually 3xing over a cycle, or in a point where you need to chase higher multiples? Because it's a tendency that I especially see from Beanie, putting it out that there's no need to do anything else than hold BTC. But if say your stack at the start of the bull market is 20K and you make 60K out of it, or even say 100K, that's amazing. But if your goal is to make it in crypto and to set yourself financially free, realistically speaking, that won't be enough. Maybe you have the time horizon to go through a couple of cycles and do that. But if you want that a bit accelerated, then you might want to take a couple more risk on positions and actually try to outperform what ETH, BTC, or Solana are doing by taking a leveraged position, whether that's in JPEGs, altcoins, memes, or whatever tickles your fancy.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. I guess it all depends on your time horizon, how much you're willing to put on the line at any particular point in time and what your intentions are. So very fair points. Before we get into the headlines, guys, I think what would be helpful, Brad, we spoke a little bit about some of the opportunities that you're looking at, whether that's on Bitcoin, ETH, restaking, Solana. Anything you'd like to share in particular, something that's kind of top of mind for you that you think is particularly interesting to you at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm sitting pretty, I'm doing the Bitcoining to kind of take the edge off for needing to do something. But a lot of the big opportunities I think have been there for a while, and I'm just staying comfy in those. That's the restaking stuff. We were talking a little bit about some Cosmos farming I'm doing with Stride. There's just a lot of opportunities where I can make those meager gains, right? Farming points. I still think restaking is hugely, even though there's $10 billion worth of ETH locked in, I still think that entire thing is hugely under respected, frankly, in this ecosystem, even still. And then, so just sitting pretty, farming that stuff, being content with that, and then just doing a little flipping on the side. I don't actually do a whole lot of trading.
And just for the people who, I'm sure they've heard of the restaking narrative, but might not be entirely clear or just not know exactly what to do. What would be the best way for someone to get involved in the restaking narrative, and what does restaking at a very simplistic level mean?
Yeah, I think just the easiest way to think about it is it's going to be another layer added on to the DeFi ecosystem, right? Everything today is collateralized by ETH and Ethereum, right? It's the largest DeFi ecosystem. And that moved to staked ETH at one point because you get a little bit of yield, but then also now you can use that stuff for using DeFi protocols. And now it's going one layer deeper where you can take your staked ETH and then restake it for other things external to ETH. And that ecosystem is still not yet released, and it is maturing. And because it is maturing, there's a lot of incentive programs out there to just place your capital there. So it's just it's having your Ethereum, instead of securing ETH for just ETH gains, you're securing ETH and securing an external thing for a little bit more gains, and then you use that for plugging the DeFi. So I don't want to get too technical to take hours, but it's maturing and there's a lot of opportunity. So that's where I'm placing my bets.
Sounds good. And as you said, I think there's $10 billion worth of ETH now locked in EigenLayer, right?
Yeah, correct. I just pressed that, I think, last week.
It's pretty insane. I've actually heard that as being like one of the reasons why the ETH price goes up to some level, because it's just become like there's this various, particularly the restaking narrative, but other things as well. It's just becoming this sink for all of the ETH. Like all of the ETH is getting tied up in these things, which means that there's less ETH around and about just to to be sold.
Yeah, every bridge, every restaking, like all of DeFi protocols, pools, everything, all of that stuff is reasons to not sell your ETH, right? You do this other thing, because like that's always the problem with coins that go down, right? You get it and you go, what can I do with this? Oh, I can sell it. You sell it, right? If it's the first thing top of mind, then you sell it, because it's like airdrops. Oh, cool, I got this thing, sell it. I don't know I can't do anything with it, sell it. If you have other things like bridging, like restaking, like staking, like DeFi, like lending, like NFTs, like whatever, it just gives you that one thing to do before you have to sell, or before you have that desire to sell. And that's what makes price go up, right?
I completely agree. The most simplistic way I've spoken about ETH, or just like the reason why I like it so much, is just I've always described it just being so useful. Like it's so useful to like do stuff with, which is not necessarily the case for all the other assets. But very, very interesting discussion to kick us off. Let's get into some of the headlines now. We've still got more than 20 minutes left to get into those. Starting in the very delightful, joyful place of all-time highs for Bitcoin, ETH going past 4K. Just going to get the chart up on the screen for the people watching in and just want some chart porn. Want to see that. Sammy, how's this chart making you feel? Getting excited here. Past 72K now for the audience listening in and watching in, up 3.5%, past 72K now. Sammy, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin price movement?
I thought you said Britcoin then. I think, which was actually it was going to be a Bitcoin of the UK. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's price discovery, isn't it? It could go anywhere. It's hard to tell. I think that's the exciting part. I don't know if there's going to be a pullback, maybe retesting that before it goes again. I mean, I was looking at sort of other indicators to see if there's some sort of retail interest. I know Google Trends saw that there's a bit of a pump in the search for Bitcoin, and obviously as that hits new all-time highs, hits mainstream media, naturally you have that. The other indicators are kind of, you look at those shows that are crypto focused and seeing if the views have gone up, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously Nick recently with his virality, I mean that feels like it's broken out of crypto Twitter, so that could be another indicator.
Couldn't love that anymore.
I know, it's so good. So yeah, I think there's a number of things, just trying to work out whether this is going to pull back again or whether it is going to stay above there and push on. But it's in price discovery, so it's anyone's guess.
I like that you mentioned the Google search trend thing, because I believe that it's usually a reasonable indicator, and it has kind of been tracking up. I'd love to hear from NFT Stats in a moment as well. We've got Sam up on stage with us, but first, Legendary, what do you think of the extent to which retail even matter anymore? Like I've seen this position kind of put out recently, which says, look, it doesn't matter whether they join in and kind of pile in as well. The ETFs have kind of nullified that, and we're just going to keep going higher.
I think retail matters very much. Like if you look at ETFs and you look at the history, how they have evolved, how the S&P 500 had evolved, and how it became like part of your 401k, and how it like became a good habit to allocate some of that money into something like an S&P 500. And if the same is to happen for, it's something we touched on the show, for the BTC ETFs, and it just becomes the like quote unquote golden standard to allocate 1 to 2% of your portfolio in crypto, then retail will absolutely matter. I think it would be unwise to say, fuck it, we have institutions pumping our bags and retail guy doesn't matter because BTC is at 72K and that's more than enough. I think it does still matter quite a lot what retail does and will do.
Fair enough. I think that's a reasonable take. Would love to hear from NFT Stats as well. Welcome to the stage, Sam. Congratulations on being up on your previous all-time high Bitcoin buys. How are you feeling about that and the asset at this point?
I'm cooking, man. I'm up like 10%, and I bought it 3 years ago.
Amazing.
I've been kind of in and out on this conversation. Every now and then I'm like doing other stuff, and I'm up here, and then you call on me, and I'm like, I need a question repeat, and then I'll hit it.
It's more Bitcoin's at all-time high. How are you feeling? What are you thinking about it? Maybe in particular, like retail versus ETF, and not because they're against each other, but the extent to which retail matters in this market. We're maybe feeling like some retail's coming back, but also you've got this ETF with a ferocious demand. Like, do you see one being, well, I think ETFs are more important, but is it important that retail comes back in the way that it seemed necessary to move markets before?
Yeah, I'm still not convinced that any new degens have actually joined the fray in the past like 3 years. I think that what we've had here is just a mad inflow because Bitcoin and ETH are suddenly buyable for the masses. Like even me, I work in this industry full time, and I find it hard to add to my, like, I actually personally find it, again, I'm a boomer, right? I have most of my money kind of in the traditional system. I find it easier just to buy the ETF than actually buy Bitcoin. Like or ETHE, which has like the advantage of being at a discount. Like, sure. And so imagine my dad or my father-in-law, both of whom have asked me how to buy Bitcoin via the ETFs. I'm like, it's pretty easy. But I just think that what we're seeing here is this massive inflow of capital to Bitcoin and ETH. But if you actually look at the numbers of people who are buying NFTs or even meme coins, it's very, very different from the last rally we had where everyone was stuck at home because of COVID, and you had like the GameStop era, and basically it became a full-time job to sit at your computer and buy stuff. Like, I feel like that's actually not what's happening here. And we just have all these inflows. People are getting richer, but I don't feel like we have a lot of new participants, certainly not in the NFT game. I include ordinals broadly in the NFT game. Sure. Meme coins I have a bit less data on, but that's just like my broad sense. And, I would recommend you guys do this because I've done it a lot. Ask your followers when the first time they bought a meme coin or an NFT was. And you'll find that at least 80% of them, it's 2022 or earlier, which means that like very few of the people who are paying attention right now have, like, pretty much everybody was here at the last bull market. That doesn't mean it's not going to keep going. I think it does keep going, but it's a very different flavor of rally.
Interesting. So I guess, yeah, that does kind of, is your position then that kind of same retail flow in isn't necessary to sustain this rally? Because I guess the suggestion is there's just bigger things at play here, which is moving the market forward.
Yeah, I think we've had a rally without any new degen participants. Like, I do this poll all the time, and I think it's a relevant data point. When was the first time you bought a meme coin or an NFT? Do that poll, say 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021 or earlier. And if your followers are the same as mine, that's why I'd encourage someone else to do it, so I can see if this is just my followers. You will find that 80% plus were 2022 or earlier. Like, it's just, there are very few new participants in this game that we play.
Very interesting. Interesting question to ask. I mean, there was definitely this point in time where I was completely struck by, maybe it was because I was new to crypto and just didn't understand the scale of everything, but when we were in the bear market and people just started locking up like huge amounts of money in Blast or something and huge amounts of money in Eigenlayer, and it just made me think that there's like a lot of, I can't remember what it was. Maybe there were some other occasions as well where it's just like all of this sidelined capital, just like ready to pile into different parts of the ecosystem. So I can see how it's not necessarily the money from outside coming in, but there's this pool of people who are already participants. And especially when you think about the NFT perspective, when you have these huge whales kind of doing things on Blur, huge funds like, I don't know, Free Lunch Capital buying accumulating huge amounts in order to bootstrap Flooring Protocol. I think all of those things are relevant too. Brad, want to throw to you here before we move on to the Peplicators NFT news. What are your thoughts on the kind of crypto price action? ETH past 4K, Bitcoin at all-time highs.
I mean, yeah, I just it's going to continue to melt up the amount of inflows that we're seeing from the ETF. And like, I actually do agree with Sam saying that it's not a lot of new people pouring in money now. It's just ETF inflows, structural buying that's going to come in. It's going to hit a DGen. DGen goes, oh, sweet, I got my bag. They sell it. And then they go down the risk curve a little bit because now they have a little bit of extra money to goof around on meme coins, whatever, or they get some airdrop money. So I think the combination of all of us psyoping ourselves into thinking we need to have more exposure to meme coins on top of just the actual inflows that are coming into the top is just, yes, it's leading to a lot of froth, but still intra ecosystem froth, which I think is fine. Like, it's natural. We're going to go through these ups and downs in narrative waves or whatever. I was actually just taking a picture of this. You asked me earlier kind of what I was trading with. I've been doing a lot of exposure to the base ecosystem. That's what I've been doing. I really think that's my counter to Solana and its user experience is going to take over everything. Is that Coinbase is continuing to roll out all these things, and that ecosystem is continuing to mature. So I've been making sure to try to get some exposure over there, whether it's in positions in coins or transactions on the chain, because I think there's going to be a token.
Interesting. So A, you think there'll be a base token, and then B, do you think is there a particular reason why that L2, because there's other L2s also going on, which will also have tokens. EK Sync's coming, Scroll is coming, Blast is obviously building at the same time. Why would you prioritize base over some of those other ones?
It's always distribution, always distribution. That's the thing, because but like Blast is, I would say, pretty objectively in the technical community considered a shitty L2, but it doesn't matter, right? Because Pac-Man's great at getting eyes and money, and because of that, it's gonna succeed, it's gonna thrive. I think Coinbase is the same, right? We're all looking at Coinbase downloads as a metric of who's gonna become an ecosystem, all these new retail people, whatever. And if we're looking at that at the metric, well, where is Coinbase gonna funnel their users to, right? They're gonna funnel it directly to their L2 because they make money on that sequencer fee, and they own the entire stack. So they come in through the SEX. You download their on-chain wallet. They funnel you to their L2. They have a suite of tools right there for you to even spin up wallets. I go through Smart Wallet and Beta. You don't even need anything. It's just with a passkey, it generates a wallet right there. You can mint an NFT. It's sponsored because it's on Base, because they have their partnership with Circle. So there's a little bit of USDC backing that they can actually play in this thing. I just think that entire funnel that they've captured over the bear market is going to play out where they push everyone there. And I want to be where the people are going to go.
Very interesting thesis. I agree with you on the token aspect, or not that I know that or think that it will definitely happen, but I think it's a very reasonable position to take, especially because I don't know if people remember, but we report on this every day. So I notice the flip-flops when people say one thing, then they try to take it back, and then they go the other way. At one point in time, they very much alluded to it as if they kind of admitted that it was going to happen, which is a strange thing to do if it's then not going to happen. And then they had to row back, like, I can't remember, 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later to say, no, there will not be one. And it kind of just makes you wonder, like, well, why did you say that we're moving towards decentralization and, and all of the implications with that. So interesting perspective there. I think that'll be helpful to keep in mind. Right, let's move on to the next news. But before we do that, let's get into the Web3 roundup from the Snapshot to get you up to speed with everything else that has been happening in the Web3 space over the last 24 hours / 48 hours, because it's got the weekend too. So we've got the top blur farmer of Mutant selling 250 into bids for a $500,000 loss. That was information shared by Cyrus. I think a lot of collections, there's a lot of NFTs in the holders of farmers who don't want them. So I think people are quite vulnerable from that perspective at the moment. Number 2, Zeus Network and Sharkify win the Jupiter DAO vote to become the first project launched on the LFG Launchpad. I think that's super interesting because obviously Jupiter is the most successful DEX on Solana, and they're pushing forward with this Launchpad to help others launch too. And those are the 2 protocols who will be launching first. Number 3, BNB leads top 5 coins on the 7-day chart, up 25%. I don't know if that's accurate right now, but I did find that interesting this morning when I was looking at the charts. And my point was that even in crypto, we are deeply affected by our geography. You wouldn't know it, but BNB was actually the biggest mover in the last 7 days from the top 5 coins. It just shows that, a coin which is predominantly thought about and talked about in the East just doesn't get the same mindshare and attention in the West. And I just thought that was interesting to point out, given that it was up more than anything else, but I don't see it on my timeline in the same way I see other coins. See, that a next CEO of BlackRock says Bitcoin is bigger than any government. Larry Fink really going to bat for Bitcoin, protecting and pushing forward their latest investments. That was nice to hear. Sappy Seals announced Open World Tech Demo for Tuesday, the 12th of March. That is tomorrow. Sappy Seals building super hard, producing something that looks pretty interesting. Looking forward to see that. Next, Nick of NFT Morning Show goes super viral, as Legendary already mentioned, with Choose Rich skits. Choose Rich meme coin reaches a $9.3 million FTV. Pretty impressive. I don't know to what extent that's officially endorsed in any way, but people are having fun. And finally, Kevin Rose, the founder of Moonbirds and Proof, former CEO of them both, sells many NFTs, saying he still owns some assets and has NFT exposure via Flamingo DAO. Caused a little bit of upset amongst community, but people are going to move on. Legendary, that is the Web3 roundup. Anything you'd like to touch on there before we hit the Peplicator Matt Fury details?
Yeah, very much agree with your take on BNB. It's so interesting. I never see it on my timeline. It's essentially the third largest cryptocurrency if you don't count Tether. Yeah. It is a useful coin in the sense of getting access to all those Binance launchpads. I think for some people, it might be my hypothesis. It's also like an easy way into crypto exposure if you're like a more traditional Binance user, not necessarily Web3 native, and you just buy the largest exchanges coin. But I've never seen people talk about BNB in my timeline. I do hold it back, but it's interesting that it doesn't like penetrate our attention bubble.
I completely agree. And yes, so for the people watching in, you can see, for the people who are not, I'll just read it out. Bitcoin is up 10% in the last 7 days. ETH is up 15. Solana is up 12. BNB is up 25% at $523. So looking at the chart on the last month, this was down at 320.
You'd love to see it. Look at that.
It's amazing. It's amazing, but it's just so interesting that like it's just not on my timeline. I was just looking at it today just out of interest, and it just shows how much of our perspectives are formed and shaped by the few core people who we trust. And like, look, I'm going to go to that person on the timeline for my information. I'm going to keep checking these people out. And it's like, look, this coin is cooking. And I do think, Legendary, to your point about the Binance Launchpad stuff, are you able to speak to that utility? Like, because when I put that tweet out in the morning, someone commented to say something about the Binance Launchpads. And actually, over the weekend, Ovi actually tweeted out as well to say, study, as you tweeted out saying no one knows how to write a tweet without someone telling someone to study something at the moment. He said, study Binance Launchpad coins. The market makers absorb airdrop supply every time, then starts bidding when the sellers are done. Then the coins go up 2 to 3x as FOMO ensues. Sophisticated players who realize this game only make the outcome more inevitable. So 2 questions for you, Legendary, because are you aware of whatever this BNB utility is? Can you speak to that? And then maybe a second point, I think it's got something to do with this Launchpad. Have you kind of noticed this trend as well? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, what BNB has multiple uses. Sammy just also pointed out in our private chat, he sees it as a retail indicator. One of the first coins he bought to reduce his Binance trading fees on the exchange. Like with many exchanges that have a coin, you can use it to basically get in a cheaper tier of fees. And in terms of the Launchpad, like the really interesting part about it is you have stuff like Pixels, etc., launching on Binance. They have a launch pool, and not all tokens do get a launch pool, but those that do come with a BNB farming. So basically you just throw BNB, you stake it for a period of time before the TG in said pool, and you get a pro rata reward of the total token pool depending on your share versus the total amount of BNB that's in there. So you can basically think about it like that only the most hyped or the biggest launches get the launch pad or the launch pool feature on Binance, and those are the ones that you will be able to participate in with BNB. And that's a quite worthwhile thing to do. In terms of your second question of like the post airdrop dump and then pump, that's definitely a good thing to study. I think the important part there, the part that many people probably are not like fully aware of, is how market makers work and how Binance works with market makers around the TGE to provide sufficient liquidity, like across a certain like depth of liquidity, but also like band of liquidity. And this is basically the supply shock that's often being absorbed around TGE. And if there's like then genuine interest in the coin, which you potentially could assume, given that Binance did their due diligence and allowed it to launch on the launchpad, then you will have actual interest flowing in. We've seen that with Portal Coin as well. For example, Portal Coin now being back at 260. In my timeline last week was like, oh, Portal Coin is at $2. I thought this is the future of gaming. Ha ha ha! It's down 25% from launch. But that kind of makes sense. You have those pre-sales, you have airdrop farmers, you have launchpad farmers. They are dumping. You have someone who has to absorb the liquidity. You can't launch a TG without having at that scale, without having a market maker who's there to make sure that there is enough like liquidity there to absorb that initial supply shock. And from there, you see then the organic trading action happening.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. I do think that's definitely worth paying attention to. So thank you for that very helpful explanation, Legendary. Last few minutes of the show, want to touch on the Peplicators. This is a tweet from NFT Stats with some core details we have, showing it on the screen live for people watching in, reading it out for those listening in. Some Peplicator stats: price 0.05 mint for Fury holders, 0.35 ETH at one point in time. I believe it's down now to 0.2. 59% all Peplicators have already traded hands, so aggressively traded. 74% of trades have been on Blur and 25% on OpenSea. 25.36 ETH in royalties paid on top of 800 ETH in mint fees for an average royalty of 0.7 ETH. Top sell an 11.1 ETH and 2 Trait Skull for 9.6 ETH. So some big buys coming in there. Sammy, any takes on this collection? I was completely dumbfounded. Like, even if I had seen this, which I didn't, even if I had seen it, I was like, I wouldn't have bought, because I'm aware that Fury's other collections like have not been doing particularly well relative to other things. But as Legendary said, it's buy anything season if it's got some kind of meme or the right timing. Like, what was your take on it?
It actually reminds me of I don't know if you guys were around for Nifty Degens, where you could roll the traits and stuff for that particular Web3 game, which then had like a Smash Bros style game that you could play as well. So it reminded me of that, and there's a lot of hype around that. And I think Cyberkong's got into it or backed it back in the day, back in 2021, and that did really well. And this kind of mechanism reminds me of that, but kind of 2 years on, or 3 years on. I think it had a lot of big people on the timeline backing it as well. I mean, they minted a lot. For me, I probably wouldn't have bought it. I didn't see it. I didn't know about it. But given the supply, like I would not have guessed.
Open edition as well, right?
Yeah, as an open edition, you could mint it. You could create your own traits or whatever through the randomization process. And I think Duke mentioned earlier that it was free to do that. So, and then you mint it for 0.05 ETH, which to me, like, that's like $200. So it's not cheap for the average person. You get 20,000 minted. So I personally wouldn't have predicted it. It just absolutely ripped, and yeah, fair play to them. But yeah, I completely missed out.
Yeah, interesting. Want to hear Bread's thoughts on this to bring it to a conclusion. But Legendary first, what was your thinking when you replied to me in our chat earlier? Just like, buy anything.
Look, I didn't see it myself. It was Moritz who brought it to my attention, and I was like, okay, it's meme season. Pepe is past all-time high. I definitely need this. This could age well. And also, Moritz made a very good point of like the high gas fees kind of playing in favor of the open edition, because people might be reluctant to mint, might be reluctant to re-roll, and that in such an environment, like if this were to be on Solana for 0.05 Solana at 0 gas fees, people might have minted a shit ton of those. I mean, apart from the fact that like Pepe is obviously predominantly ETH culture due to the meme coin, but just the high gas fees as an entry barrier could be in favor of a more limited collection, and 20K at the end of the day is not too big of a collection size at all for something like that.
Fair enough. That's clearly the opposing view to mine, but your thinking is helpful there because that's clearly what other people thought too. So the correct way to look at it. Brad, any final reflections on that this NFT collection by Matt Fury, and how are you approaching NFTs in general at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, nothing specific with Matt Fury. I avoided. I'm actually in the group chat with Bats, who's a pretty prolific Pepe art creator, right? I'm a collector of him. Yeah, so like I was aware of it. They were all super excited of it for a lot of reasons, but you know, I'm gonna push back on the, even though it is buy everything season because you pretty much wouldn't go anywhere. I'm trying to practice discipline right now because there are so many things going up so much everywhere.
Yeah,
I'm trying to just like, you know, I don't have to have a position in everything. Same thing with ordinals. Like great ecosystem, people are winning. I'm so happy for everyone, but like I don't have the mind share to do the level of diligence that I like to do whenever I'm slinging stuff around. I do a little shit pointing to cut the edge off. And then yeah. So is that, I mean, I just put it in our chat, Savvy Seals did their announcement. So like this weekend I bought some Pixel because I assumed that was gonna pump. Nice. I'm honestly, I'll probably sell off my seal as this rides up because I think it's going to catch a wave and then it's going to fall back. So probably do some of that, but I don't do NFT trading day to day. I'm a big holder in plane disorders, and like I wait that day when those things go crazy. So I think that's going to happen, but I'm more of a timing over long horizon than a weekend trader.
Nice. I think that's very important, or like thoughtful wisdom to try to determine like where to place your chips. You can't place your chips everywhere. I think that's almost definitely true in this type of market that we are in. But guys, we have run over time. It's been a great, fantastic discussion. Brad, thank you so much for joining us. For the people who might be less familiar with you, where can they keep in touch with you and anything else that you might be working on?
Yeah, sneaky there. So yeah, just follow me on Twitter. Obviously, the account OXBread guy. Yeah, I am working on something, and I think it'll be debuting sometime this week, maybe next week, depending on how it goes. But really excited about it. It'll be on Ethereum, so look out.
We'll keep our eyes open. Thank you so much for joining us, mate. And thank you, as always, to my co-host Legendary and Sammy. And thank you to the rest of our speakers, NFT Stats, Tiro up on stage, and thank you to everyone else joining. In terms of timing for tomorrow, we will confirm whether we will be 7 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Eastern time, British Summer Time, GMT, CET. We're going to figure that out and put our announcement a little bit later. But thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. We will be back tomorrow and we will confirm the time. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.